Department of Justice has posted online portions of 3 previously missing FBI interviews related to sexual assault allegations against President Trump. A CNN analysis previously revealed the witness interviews had been missing from an archive of evidence. The records involve a woman who told agents she was sexually abused by both Epstein and Trump in the 1980s, starting when she was 13 years old. The FBI interviewed the woman about the disturbing allegations 3 times in 2019. 16 pages from those interviews were posted yesterday, but many are heavily redacted, and 37 more pages are believed to still be missing.
Donald Trump has spent years surviving scandals that would have politically vaporized almost anybody else. Impeachments, investigations, leaks, courtrooms, raids, lawsuits, indictments. At this point, the man walks through controversy the way Florida walks through hurricanes. Everybody screams, the internet catches fire. Cable news turns into a screaming contest, and somehow, Trump walks out the other side still standing there talking about polls. But this newest Epstein-related controversy? This one feels different. Because now we're talking about missing FBI interview records, disturbing allegations from a woman who claims she was abused as a child, and a Department of Justice release that instantly detonated across the internet the second people realized what had quietly appeared online. And the moment this story dropped, social media transformed into a digital riot. Because America has reached the point where the second the words Trump, Epstein, and missing files appear in the same sentence, the internet immediately starts acting like somebody just discovered the nuclear launch codes hidden inside a Buffalo Wild Wings menu. Everybody loses their minds instantly. And honestly, you can kind of understand why. Because the Epstein story already feels less like reality and more like a conspiracy iceberg floating through American politics. Every few months, some new detail surfaces and the public reaction is always the same. Wait. What? How did nobody know this? Why does this keep getting weirder? And now the Department of Justice has released portions of 3 previously missing FBI interviews connected to allegations involving Trump and Epstein. Not rumors on social media, not screenshots from some anonymous account named Patriot Dragon 1776, actual FBI interview documents, which immediately changed the energy around the story. Because once official records enter the conversation, everything becomes louder. The interviews reportedly involve a woman who told the FBI she was sexually abused by both Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump, beginning in the 1980s when she was 13 years old. Let that sentence hit you for a second. Because regardless of politics, that is horrifying. The FBI interviewed the woman 3 separate times in 2019 regarding the allegations. 16 pages were finally posted online. But here's where things start sounding like a political thriller, written by a caffeine-addicted Netflix producer. The release pages are heavily redacted, and according to reports, 37 more pages are still missing entirely. Missing. That word alone instantly launches the internet into maximum conspiracy mode, because Americans do not hear missing FBI pages calmly anymore. They hear somebody is hiding something. That is where the public mind immediately goes. And social media exploded the second the story started spreading. TikTok detectives suddenly became constitutional scholars overnight. Twitter threads started appearing with arrows, screenshots, timelines, circles, highlighted paragraphs, blurry charts, and enough dramatic music to make it feel like the Da Vinci Code directed by TMZ. People online were acting like Nicolas Cage was about to steal the Declaration of Independence by midnight. And then came the political reactions. Democrats immediately started hammering the story as another example of Trump being surrounded by scandal everywhere he goes. Republicans immediately pushed back, saying the allegations are unproven, politically timed, and part of another media-feeding frenzy. Meanwhile, independent voters are just sitting there staring at the screen like exhausted divorced parents watching 2 raccoons fight inside a dumpster at 3 a.m. Nobody trusts anybody anymore. That is the atmosphere this story landed in. Total institutional exhaustion. Because Americans are burnt out. Every week feels like another scandal, another leak, another hearing, another investigation, another bombshell report. At this point, people hear the phrase breaking news and instinctively assume somebody somewhere either got indicted, hacked, exposed, arrested, sued, leaked, or caught on camera screaming in an airport. The country is running on pure chaos fumes. And Trump somehow remains at the center of it constantly. That is what makes him such a bizarre political figure. Most politicians spend their careers trying to avoid controversy. Trump practically moves through controversy, like a WWE wrestler entering an arena with pyrotechnics exploding behind him. The chaos almost became part of the brand. But Epstein's stories hit differently. They always do. Because Epstein became symbolic of something much larger than one criminal case. Power, corruption, elite protection, hidden networks, wealth-shielding consequences. The public obsession with Epstein is really an obsession with whether powerful people ever truly face accountability. That is the emotional engine driving every one of these stories, which is why these newly released FBI interview pages immediately caught so much attention, especially because CNN had previously reported the interviews were missing from the archive entirely. Missing evidence automatically creates suspicion. It is basically human nature. You tell people files disappeared, and the public immediately starts imagining shadowy government officials feeding documents into industrial shredders while dramatic violin music plays in the background. And because the released pages are heavily redacted, that only fuels speculation harder. The human brain hates empty spaces. When information is blacked out, people automatically imagine the worst possible explanation. That is why conspiracy theories spread so fast online. Mystery itself becomes gasoline. And then there's Trump's connection to Epstein historically. Photos, social interactions, old comments, public appearances. Every time the Epstein story resurfaces, all of those old clips get dragged back onto the internet like cursed artifacts from a digital graveyard. The same videos circulate, the same photos spread again, the same debates reignite, and every side becomes even more entrenched than before. But here is where things get genuinely dangerous politically. The allegations in these FBI interviews involve abuse claims from when the woman was 13 years old. That immediately transforms the story from political scandal into something emotionally radioactive. Because once allegations involve minors, the public reaction becomes visceral instantly. Rational political analysis disappears, and pure emotional outrage takes over. That is why these stories become impossible to control once they spread online. Nobody wants nuance. Nobody wants legal caution. Social media does not reward restraint. It rewards emotional certainty, which creates a nightmare environment for truth itself. Because now every side starts weaponizing fragments of information. One side screams proof, the other screams hoax. Everybody cherry-picks details supporting whatever they already believed emotionally before reading anything. Meanwhile, the actual released documents sit buried underneath millions of hot takes from people who probably did not read a single page. That is modern media in one sentence. Outrage first, reading later. Maybe. And honestly, the funniest part is watching politicians suddenly pretend they deeply care about transparency only when transparency hurts the other side. Republicans scream about media bias until Democrats get investigated. Democrats scream about accountability until leaks damage their own allies. Everybody suddenly becomes a constitutional philosopher whenever politically convenient. Washington at this point feels less like government and more like professional wrestling, where everybody cuts dramatic speeches while secretly sharing catering backstage. But Epstein-related stories break through even that usual partisan fog because the public genuinely believes there are still hidden truths buried underneath the case. That suspicion never died. It only mutated online over time, which is why every newly released document immediately generates massive attention. People are desperate for clarity, desperate for some final answer, explaining why the Epstein story still feels unfinished years later. And now, these newly released FBI interview records are reopening all of those wounds again, especially because of the missing pages. 37 missing pages sounds like the setup for a streaming documentary narrated by somebody whispering dramatically over piano music. You can already hear the trailer voice. What was inside the missing documents? And who didn't want them released? Netflix executives probably smelled money the second this story broke. Because America has become addicted to scandal documentaries, people now watch corruption exposés the way earlier generations watched sitcoms. Murder mysteries, political conspiracies, fraud scandals, billionaire crimes. Americans consume corruption stories recreationally now. And honestly, can you blame them? Reality already feels crazier than fiction half the time. But the real issue underneath this entire controversy is institutional trust. Again, everything always circles back there now. The public does not trust media fully, does not trust politicians fully, does not trust federal agencies fully, does not trust billionaires fully, does not trust tech companies fully. Everybody suspects everybody else is manipulating information constantly, which creates the perfect environment for stories like this to explode infinitely online. Because uncertainty breeds obsession, and redactions breed obsession even faster. Meanwhile, Trump himself has repeatedly denied wrongdoing connected to Epstein. That denial remains central to the political divide surrounding the case. Supporters see the allegations as politically weaponized attacks. Critics see patterns they believe are impossible to ignore. And somewhere in the middle, sits the exhausted public trying to figure out whether anybody in American power structures ever tells the full truth anymore. That exhaustion is becoming the defining emotional mood of modern politics. Not just anger, fatigue. People are tired. Tired of scandals, tired of leaks, tired of investigations, tired of endless media wars. Tired of feeling like every institution operates inside some giant PR machine where reality itself gets filtered through partisan algorithms before anybody even knows what happened. And stories like this only deepen that feeling. Because once the words missing FBI records enter the conversation, trust erodes even further. That is the real long-term damage here. Not just political embarrassment, institutional corrosion. Because if people stop believing records are preserved honestly, investigations handled transparently, or evidence released consistently, the entire system starts looking unstable. And once trust collapses publicly, rebuilding it becomes almost impossible. Which is why this story matters beyond just Trump. It represents something much larger happening culturally. America no longer reacts to scandals normally. Every scandal now becomes content, conspiracy, tribal warfare, meme fuel, political ammunition, and emotional entertainment all at the same time. The line between news and spectacle completely shattered years ago. And stories involving Trump, Epstein, missing records, and the FBI are basically the perfect storm for internet chaos. Because the second this type of controversy appears, everybody online becomes a detective, a lawyer, a political strategist, and a conspiracy theorist simultaneously. The only thing missing is dramatic interrogation lighting and somebody screaming, "Enhance the image" in a dark room. And somehow, this story still feels unfinished. That is the strangest part. No matter how many headlines emerge, how many leaks happen, or how many documents get released, the Epstein saga still hangs over American politics like a storm cloud nobody can fully escape. And now with these newly released FBI interview pages, reigniting everything all over again, the internet is once again asking the same terrifying question. What else still has not been revealed?